Boxing truth here. Alright, the boxing topic of today is Terence Crawford's call out of Danny Garcia. As there's some shit talking going on between the two fighters. As Crawford is not very pleased with the words of Angel Garcia, Danny's father, stating in an interview that HBO should be embarrassed for Crawford's the type of numbers Crawford produced in his pay-per-view against Postal. That Postal's some hyped up, made up champion. And Crawford took to Twitter and called out Danny Garcia, saying that if your father thinks I'm some paper champion, some hype job, that he'd be willing to move up in weight, and challenged Danny Garcia for his strap. Just tell his father to make the fight, and they can throw down. Now, when it comes to Angel Garcia's statements, calling Postal some made-up champion or whatever, you gotta realize that, it was your boy, your son, Danny Garcia, who blatantly avoided the fight with Victor Postal for a long time. Postal was the WC mandatory for a long time, and Danny Garcia's team was willing to spend six figures, step-aside money, to avoid the fight with Postal, as Danny Garcia kept prolonging the mandatory defense, kept bullshitting around, and everybody in boxing knew Danny Garcia was never going to fight Victor Postal. It wasn't going to happen. So Garcia kept taking bouts outside the junior welterweight division. First, there was a catchweight with Lamont Peterson after he fought Rod Saka at a catchweight. And then he vacated the title, the WC title, Danny did, in order to fight Paulie Malignaggi, which is not a good look. He took a path of least resistance. Yes, he got paid very well to take a much safer fight against a guy who was coming off a knockout loss in Paulie Malignaggi, who was pretty much just used as an opponent for Danny Garcia's introduction to the welterweight division. And Angel wants to call guys paper champions, but right now Danny Garcia is a paper champion. He's got a strap with WC, but he won a vacant strap against a hyped up Guerrero at welterweight. I mean, who the fuck Guerrero was beating at welterweight? Seriously. A Mayweather leftover who's done jack shit in the welterweight division. He was a much better fighter at 126 at 130 pounds. Now, Crawford has a point that, he beat the guy, he fought the guy that Danny and his team were scared to fight. They never even acknowledged Postal, never wanted to fight him, and Danny was even willing to pay step-aside money and take fights outside the division at catchweights in order to avoid the fight with Postal. That would have been a much more dangerous fight compared to Garcia fighting Malignaggi. And he had a clear win over Guerrero, but it was a tougher fight than expected, and he couldn't really put a dent in Robert Guerrero. He couldn't really hurt him. So the thing is, I'm not a big Terence Crawford fan, and I'm losing respect, more and more respect by the day for Danny Garcia because of his behavior, his antics. I mean, the guy thinks he's a superstar. He thinks he overvalues his worth. I mean, just listen to the interviews with his father. I mean, this guy is talking about they want $20 million for a Mayweather fight if he ever comes back. $20 million. I mean, Mayweather wouldn't even give Canelo more than $10 million guaranteed money. You really gonna think he can get $20 million fighting Mayweather? They're talking about even more for fighting Pacquiao. I mean, and that's the thing. Danny Garcia backtracked his statements, saying that he lied about the Pacquiao offer. Why the fuck would you do that, man? Come on, bro. Like, who's going to believe that? Pretty much just backed off from the statements of being offered the Pacquiao fight. Offered a purse that was guaranteed money plus upside. And now, most likely, he's going to take a fight with Andre Berto in September. A fight that, it's a safe fight. We already know who's going to win. Berto's not a top fighter. He's getting opportunities for not doing nothing, really, losing to Mayweather, knocking out a mentally shot Victor Ortiz, and that's all he has to do to get a title shot. He's just an opponent, a safe fight for Danny Garcia. And that's the thing. Crawford. What's interesting about Crawford's call out is that he's willing to move up in weight for Danny Garcia, but how come he hasn't been willing to move up in weight for Pacquiao? And when it comes to Pacquiao, he said he wants to fight at 140, but for Danny, he's willing to move up in weight. So I don't know what's up with that. But the point is, this fight ain't gonna happen. Al Heyman has plans for Danny Garcia, and it doesn't involve a Terence Crawford fight. Bob and Heyman have yet to make a deal on a fight, and right now, Heyman has plans for Danny to unify the division with Keith Thurman sometime next year. And that's pretty much why none of these guys, Garcia and Thurman, are going to be fighting Pacquiao, because Heyman has plans for them to fight sometime next year, but in between, they're going to take fights that are considered showcases, like Garcia's next fight possibly against Berto. And I'm hearing Thurman's going to be out for the rest of the year. What kind of shit is that, man? Guy was off for a long-ass time, pretty much a year. And now I'm hearing he's not going to fight for the rest of the year. So you can pretty much call Thurman's call out a Pacquiao bullshit. He called him out. He called Pacquiao out. Bob said, if you really want to fight, tell Al Heyman you want to fight. And Thurman hasn't said jack shit ever since. And now I'm hearing he's not going to fight for the rest of the year. So another fake call out from another Heyman fighter. It is what it is, man. And as for the situation, Crawford, Garcia, the fight most likely will never happen, since there's already plans in store for Garcia. Crawford, I don't know what his plan is. If he doesn't get the Pacquiao fight, then there's really nothing else out there except to make a defense of his 2 world titles at 140, or maybe possibly move up in weight. But when it comes to this fight, I would favor Terence Crawford in Danny Garcia fight, simply because of his style. He's a little more versatile. He moves a lot better, and the type of style he could bring to a Danny Garcia fight could make it very problematic. See, the Garcia is a guy who needs cooperation from his opponents. He needs opponents to come at him. That's when he's at his best. But when he has to chase guys, when he has to create offense of his own, because he's a counterpuncher, he's not nearly as effective. Just watch the first half of the fight against Lamont Peterson, how ineffective Garcia was in a lot of the rounds in the first half of that fight against Peterson. All Peterson was doing was moving around, not doing much offensively, but he was using his movement legs around, and he pretty much limited the effectiveness of Danny Garcia, as Danny Garcia is not an effective come forward type fighter. He's much more effective when opponents come at him and try to walk him down, and he can use his counterpunching abilities. That's what makes Danny Garcia at his best, when guys are coming at him. That's why he was landing some hellacious shots on Guerrero, but he wasn't able to put a dent in him, as maybe Garcia's punching power is not as good as at welterweight as it was at 140 pounds. But pretty much the topic of today, Crawford calling out Danny Garcia, says he's willing to move up in weight, wants to make Angel Garcia eat his words, and pretty much Crawford did what Garcia refused to do, or pretty much avoided to do, and that's take the challenge of Victor Postal, who was a definite threat at 140 pounds that Garcia's team was never willing to fight. And Crawford did. He got the decision, and now he's a unified champ. And now he's looking for a big fight, as most likely he's not going to get the Pacquiao fight. But it would be an interesting fight. You would hope that it could happen in the future. But 2 entities, 2 different promoters, guys that have yet to do business since the settlement was agreed to. Be an interesting fight. A fight I would actually favor Terence Crawford in against Danny Swift Garcia. This is Boxing Truth. I'm out.